So if an alien race comes and starts wiping us off out of the picture and eating us like hamburger, would you have a problem with that?
They don't value us. I mean, they're aliens. I can't place value into them that they don't have in us. I can't convince them that we have value. You know, they already think that.
But we don't have innate value if there is no God. It's just something we've created in our heads.
Exactly.
Okay, so then please don't be so arrogant to tell me that if I want to dump on him with a...
I want to ask is like tattoos and piercings a sin?
Good question. In Leviticus we read, don't put tattoos on your body.
Is that the Old Testament?
Exactly, it's Leviticus. Now the question, you see, what you always got to do when you interpret, you got to put it in context. So the question is, why in Leviticus would it say that tattoos are bad? All you got to do is read Elijah on Mount Carmel, competing against the prophets of Baal. God sent fire, and the people of Israel are watching, and they're seeking to determine who's the real true living God, Baal or Yahweh. The prophets of Baal pray, Baal, send fire. Baal, send fire. Nothing happens. What do? They start cutting themselves. The blood begins to flow. Why? Because that culture, that religion taught, if you want to get God's attention, you start cutting yourself, let the blood flow, and then God will answer your prayers. Then God will give you his attention. That's false. And so very clearly in Leviticus, God is calling the Hebrew people to be different from all the cultures around them. And one example is tattoos, marking your body, cutting yourself. So I would argue that because that was for that culture and time, there is nothing wrong with tattoos, biblically. Similarly, in Leviticus it says, you are not to wear clothing made of different cloth. Now, why would they do something like that? I mean, what's the point? Well, the point is that in that day, there was polytheism, many gods, belief in many gods. And they would mix the gods. And what God is trying to do in the book of Leviticus for the Jews is tell them there's one God, not many. And so you're not going to mix everything together. And so therefore he says you only wear clothing of one cloth. But the second point is this. The priests did wear clothing of different cloth, linen and wool, and that's because they were priests, and they were set aside. Now, I don't know which one's the accurate explanation of why God says don't wear clothing with mixed cloth in it, okay? But you see, the point is, when you got something difficult in the Bible, and there are many difficult things in the Bible, you don't just say contradiction, big problem. Instead, you learn to study the context, the culture. So what's the point of the author? Let me give you one quick example. Genesis 1:1 says what? In the beginning, who? Gods?
God.
Gods?
God.
Real loud, brother.
God.
God. Right on, brother. Okay, now why? Why is he doing that? Oh, you see, Genesis has to answer the evolutionary question. Guess what? The author, Moses, is writing to some Jewish people poised on the border of the land of Canaan to go in and conquer it. Do you think those Jews are sitting in their tents saying, wow, give me a scientific explanation of how God created? No, it's the furthest thing from their heads. What they are faced with is there a one true living God, or are there many gods? Now, all you got to do is go to the Babylonian creation myth called the Enuma Elish. Do you know how many gods create the universe in the Enuma Elish? 9. Sun god, moon god, sky god, earth god. And Genesis 1 is saying, no, not 9 gods. In the beginning, one God creates the heavens and the earth. See, that's how you begin to understand Scripture better. Well, Cliff, I'm not a biblical scholar. You don't have to be, okay? Mark Twain said, it's not the parts of the Bible I don't understand that disturb me. It's parts of the Bible I do understand that disturb me. The Bible's real simple on the surface level. But if you're a university student and you're going to start asking hard questions, then you're going to have to study. And that's what you got to challenge people here to do. I couldn't believe earlier that woman back there was standing back there. She's gone now. But she was raining on me about The Bible, the Gospels are ahistorical. And I just simply asked her, fine, why do you say that? What's your evidence that they're not historical? She didn't answer me. Then she said, and there are a lot of contradictions in the Gospels. I said, fine, give me one. She said, well, I can't really remember one. And then she said, and there are a lot of Gospels that contradict Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And guess what? She's right. But just to make sure she's doing her homework, I asked her, really, would you please give me the name of one Gospel that contradicts Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? She couldn't do it. You see, sir, that's not fair intellectually. If you're going to say something, understand why you're saying it, what's the evidence to support it.
But didn't it say, don't mark your body with like something of death? Right? Didn't it say that in the Bible?
In Leviticus, it says don't put tattoos on your body.
Yeah, but it also said, like, right next to it said, don't mark your body with a sign of death.
Okay.
Didn't it say that?
It might. I can't remember, to tell you the truth. I don't know. But I do know it says very clearly no tattoos. And so you're right, sir. A lot of guys come up to me and say, Cliff, does the Bible say we're not allowed to get tattoos? And I say, no. You've got to understand the context. And the context is the Canaanite religions, to get God's attention, you not only tattooed, you cut yourself. And you let the blood flow, and that's the way you're going to convince God that you're really sincere. You're really genuine. And God says, no, you don't do it that way. With your heart, you talk to me. Sincerely, genuinely, honestly, talk to me. And I'm going to listen to you. You don't have to cut yourself to get my attention.
Would you say some stuff in the Bible is false?
No, there's nothing in the Bible that I have read that's false. Now,
what about the hair, the woman's hair not being weaved? Men can't cut their hair and stuff.
Good.
What is that?
Okay, good. What is that? Do you know that several times Paul writes, greet one another with a holy kiss? Now, this is the second day Jeremiah's been out here, and Jeremiah was very positive to me yesterday. Do you think I have kissed Jeremiah yet? No. Okay. Why? Am I disobeying the Bible? No. I understand that when Paul is talking about a holy kiss, he's talking about love each other, respect each other. Now, in the culture of that day, men kissed each other. Jeremiah did not try to kiss me, and I did not try and kiss Jeremiah. Why? Because we live in a different culture. But I've got some other friends, maybe like Italian guys, and they've come up to me and they've planted a big kiss on my cheek. And I don't say, oh, that's gross, but I understand that's a cultural expression of love and respect. You got to learn to distinguish between culture, a particular expression of something, and the Bible. Every atheist friend of mine does good deeds. Every agnostic friend of mine does good deeds. Every Muslim friend of mine does good deeds. Every Buddhist friend of mine does good deeds. All of us as human beings at times do good. The question is why? My observation is it's because we human beings have a conscience, this innate moral indicator in us. Every atheist has a conscience. Every agnostic has a conscience. Every Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu, Christian, Jew has a conscience. So all of us, by exercising our consciences and our rational minds, can understand there's a difference between good and evil, right and wrong. So then, Cliff, what have you been doing with a moral argument? What I've been doing, ma'am, is this. If there is no God, there is no mind prior to the human mind, be it Christian, Jew, atheist, whatever, who defines right and wrong. So it's obvious who defines right and wrong if there's no God. We do. And obviously means morality is relative, because you might define one right and wrong one way, he might define it another way, I might define it another way. Nobody's right, nobody's wrong. You choose, he chooses, and I choose. It's all relative. And I'm saying you can't live that out consistently. Why? Because if someone hurts you badly enough, you're going to look them in the face and say, you should not have done that. You ought not to have done that. And when you use those two words, should and ought, you're appealing to our conscience, which informs us that there is an objective moral. And when you just cut me off at the knees, that was really bad. Not relatively bad. When you abused that innocent child, that was really bad. Not relatively bad. When you murdered that innocent person, that was really objectively evil. Not relatively evil. See, that's the way all my atheist friends live their lives. They're very good people, my atheist friends. But what happens is there's a disconnect between their thinking and their lifestyle. And the disconnect is, with the top of my head, I think it's all relative morally. But the way I live my life is, if you steal my stock portfolio, really evil. Let me give you one more example. A lot of people like to say to me, Cliff, God is love, which means God doesn't judge anybody. Everything's cool. Doesn't matter what you do. Okay. Let's say someone murders your mom and dad. They're hauled into a court of law. The judge says, you murdered this woman's mom and dad. Goodbye, have a great life. What is that saying? That is saying that your mom and dad do not matter. See, an understanding of sin means you do matter. And if somebody hurts you badly, it's really wrong. Why? Because you really matter. Well, why do you really matter? Not because you're an arrogant twit. Because you're a human being created in the image of God.
But, sorry to interrupt.
No, go.
I don't believe my value comes from something that is like, that God gives me.
Right.
My value is what I place on myself. And you're saying, what if someone murdered my parents, right?
Yes.
That does not take away their value for their lives, you know? Like, them being dead is not invaluable, is what you're saying, right?
Okay, but why are you valuable?
Well, because I place value on myself.
Okay, what's wrong with this? I'm the greatest.
There's nothing wrong with that to me, but I mean,
But am I the greatest?
if you believe you are, then you are.
Okay, I disagree. I think that if I go to the top of this building and really genuinely believe I can step off and fly, I am going to have a rude awakening as soon as I step off that building. Because I'm out of touch with reality.
Believing that you're great just in it of yourself without having something like God place that value upon yourself. It's like you believe it and you don't have to have something giving you that like value. You just believe it.
Okay, good, but think about what you're saying. There is no God who created me. My number came up in a Monte Carlo game, a crapshoot. I'm an accident. Which means, what's the difference between stepping on a cockroach versus stepping on you? Cockroach is an accident, you're an accident.
Yeah.
So, you can stand there and tell me all day long, I have value, I have value, I have value.
Just like that cockroach has value.
Do you make a distinction between me stepping on a cockroach and me stepping on you?
I guess just because it's me, and I mean, it's a cockroach, but that cockroach still has value.
Why don't you arrest people for killing cows and eating beef?
Because we're humans and we place value upon them. Just like we place values on ourselves, we place value on animals.
So if an alien race comes and starts wiping us off out of the picture and eating us like hamburger, would you have a problem with that?
They don't value us. I mean, they're aliens. I can't place value into them that they don't have in us. I can't convince them that we have value. You know, they already think that.
But we don't have innate value if there is no God. It's just something we've created in our heads.
Exactly.
Okay, so then please don't be so arrogant to tell me that if I want to dump on him with a racist attitude, that's wrong. What do you mean? That's my choice. If I want to be racist towards him, that's my reality.
No, that's not what I'm saying at all.
I know you're not saying that, but follow the line of thinking, which is, if my value is just constructed by me, and his value is just constructed by him, and if I say to be racist to him is cool, that's my choice. Don't tell me I'm wrong, because you just have your choice. I got my choice.
It's different though, because you have to
jump in on this. You're like kind of going everywhere. You're not answering her question. So
No, that would be wrong.
no, like
I am getting to the root of the question, which is, why is right right and why is wrong wrong? And I'm using different illustration, be it the cockroach and her, be it my racist attitude towards this gentleman, and she's maintaining consistently, and I respect your intellectual consistency. It's all just a matter of choice. Well, if it's all just a matter of choice, then if you step on a cockroach or if you step on her, I'm going to arrest you for both, and I'm going to try and have you held accountable for that, because that's my choice.
But you're kind of taking it away from the human aspect of it. And
what does that mean, the human aspect?
So
what's the difference between a human aspect and a cockroach aspect?
So bring your attention back to me.
I'm answering you head up, head to head.
What was the
eye contact?
question? What was your original question?
Why do you have to have God in your life to be a good person?
And I told you. What did I tell you first? You do not have to believe in God to be a good person. Remember, I told you all of my atheist friends do good things. I told you everybody does good things. In fact, I know that Adolf Hitler did good things, because my dad was a little Boy Scout in Switzerland. And Adolf Hitler was coming through the Alps, and my dad met Adolf Hitler. And Adolf Hitler didn't slap my dad around. Adolf Hitler complimented my father for being in the Swiss Boy Scouts.
You say that everyone does good things, but that doesn't necessarily make them good people.
No, I didn't say that.
Because I asked, why do you need God to be a good person? And then you said everyone does good things.
And do good. But,
yes.
So, and then I went on to explain. But if there is no God, good person is a totally relative category. What does that mean? It means goodness is a taste. Like, do you like the taste of corn or do you like the taste of beans? It's just a prejudice, just a taste. Culturally influenced, environmentally influenced, genetically influenced, whatever. It's just a taste. And I'm standing here saying you can't live that out, because you know that to step on a cockroach is radically different from stepping on a baby. Because a human being has value, not because I happen to be a human being.
Right.
Not because I give that baby value. False. That baby has innate, intrinsic, intrinsic value. Why? Because they're not pond scum evolved to a higher order. They're a human being created by God for a purpose, to love Him and to love each other.
And you're saying that I'm placing relative goodness into people, right? Like, my term of goodness, because I don't believe in God, is relative. But you're saying that because of God, we have innate value. That's what you're saying.
Because He created us for a purpose,
right.
Correct.
So when you're saying because God created people, and because that's why they have values, because they created them.
They were created for a purpose.
Now you're saying that this God is like the status, right? He's what makes people good. But as humans, you can't really like know what God is thinking, right? So who's using that value? Who's saying, oh, like, this is what's good and this is what's not good? It's the people in power, in religious power, because they're the ones interpreting God.
Really? Okay, these two guys believe in Jesus Christ, not because of people in power in religious institutions. If these two guys believed in Jesus Christ because of powerful religious people, they'd be idiots. Because you know very well in this culture what religious institutions have done to people of African American heritage. These two brothers believe in Jesus Christ because they had the intellectual honesty to refuse to allow a white Christian racist or church or institution to turn them off to the true Jesus, who did not have a racist bone in his body, who in his first sermon in Luke 4 took a pot shot at racism and almost was killed for it. And so they don't allow white supremacists who call themselves Christians to turn them off to the true Jesus, who did not have a racist bone in his body. Does that make any sense?
That makes total sense. And
Good.
I mean, I applaud you guys for your like faith and stuff, but that's not my question. My question is, who decides what's good and right? If God is deciding it, right? But as humans, who's interpreting what's good and right? Like, who's
You
doing
bet.
that?
And remember, let's go reel it back. I told you first point, human conscience. I told you that all of my atheist friends, all of my Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim friends, all of my Christian, Jewish friends have consciences. Conscience is the innate moral ability to distinguish between good and evil, right and wrong. That's why we all experience guilt at some point. Because we have a conscience that says, Cliff, when you had that racist attitude towards Jeremiah, that was evil. That was wrong. And that's why I got to turn to Jeremiah and say, please, Jeremiah, would you forgive me for my racist attitude? So conscience is the first reason. Second of all, you've got to then ask the second question, well, what's the basis of conscience? Is it just environment influencing you? Cultural influences? And if it is just environment, if it is just culture, then it's totally relative. Because if my culture tells me that I am superior because I'm white and he's inferior because he's black, it's my culture. So who are you to come from somewhere outside my culture and tell me that my racist attitude towards him is wrong? It's all relative. But if there is a God who created him in his image, if there is a God who gives him an innate value, and if there is a God who created me for a purpose, to love and respect Jeremiah, not to degrade him, then my racist attitude is not wrong because of my culture or his culture or your culture. It's wrong because he has an innate value that comes from his creator. Does that make any sense?
That makes sense to me.
It's been an honor to talk with you. I like your persistence.
Okay. Thank you. You too.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
going back to conscience, are you saying God's your conscience?
No. God is not the conscience. The conscience is an innate ability that you have to say, that's right and that's wrong. It's tied into your rational.
So basically science, you know?
No. Clear illustration for you, okay? Science tells me that if I put strychnine in my grandma's tea, it will kill her. That's science. Does science answer the question, in light of how much money my grandma has, should I put strychnine in her tea in order to kill her to get her money, or should I not? Does science answer that question? No. Now we are moving from science to philosophy and ethics. The question, should I put strychnine in grandma's tea in order to kill her to get her money? That is not a scientific question. That is an ethical, philosophical question, a spiritual question. Does that make any sense?
Not really.
You really think science answers the question, should I put strychnine in my grandma's tea to get her money?
Isn't that just conscience like you were talking about? That's just
Well,
you
how does
thinking
science
about
answer that? What does science tell me to do?
Just your brain, like
Yeah.
the way you think. You know, that's just
literally
you
saying
thinking.
What conscience is.
Bro, I'm not talking to you.
Yeah.
Like, can you not? I'm talking to the pastor.
Ma'am, I hate to tell you, science cannot answer the question, should you love her or hate her? Science does answer the question. You take out a knife and stick it in her, and she bleeds. She might bleed to death. Yes, that's obvious. That's a physical, material, scientific question. It includes, obviously, medical knowledge. Okay? But the question, should you stick a knife in her or not? It's not a scientific question, guys. And that's why when you say, I live for science, you can't live it out. You can't. Should you pay your taxes or not? Science doesn't tell you.
So why, like, you're saying, okay, God, this, and that, and they believe that too, but a religious person, I don't know. So I'm a little confused on like
Okay,
where
good.
you're going with that.
Good. It's real simple. Let's see if I can express it. God gave me a conscience, but he also gave me a free will. And God has said, I am not to stick him with a knife and murder him. But because I have a free will, I can descend to the position of saying, I'm going to murder you. Bam. That's not because of God. It's not because of conscience. It's because of my free will, my choosing to sear my conscience and knife him instead of love and respect him the way God created me to love and respect him. But now what Jesus says is, Cliff, you're free to knife him. Guess what? You're not free to escape the day of judgment, when the all-knowing God will hold you responsible for sticking a knife in him. And that's why I need Jesus Christ. Because no, I haven't knifed people, but I have hated people. No, I've never stolen a bunch of money from a bank, but I have been greedy. So I need forgiveness because I've done wrong. And my conscience convicts me by guilt. And I say, whoa, what did I do to that person? That was wrong. And I can self-reflect. I can know myself. I can judge myself, critique myself.
Right. And that's like really good. And so what I think about religion is that it's good for people who need it to be able to reflect upon themselves. You know, like I think that people should be able to do that, but some people can't without having religion.
Some of us are that proud. Like,
So that's how I
Okay.
say.
I mean, sometimes gotta skank around. I mean, I am.
And you've heard loud and clear, I hope, what I've said to you, which is, you can do good, be you atheist, agnostic, whatever, Buddhist, Hindu, Christian, Jew. But if you're an atheist, you cannot say they're objective morals. Instead, you got to say they're subjective morals, relative morality. See, I could never use this argument with a Muslim, because a Muslim and I agree. There are objective morals that come from God, from Allah.
Which one?
So with a Muslim, this is not part of the discussion. Rather, it is part of the discussion when I'm talking to agnostics or atheists. Because remember I told you, all of my atheist friends do very good things at times.
Right.
Remember that?
Yeah, you said it doesn't align with their thinking.
Correct. And if I have a thinking, a worldview, that is majorly contradicted by the way I experience life, see what I'm trying to do with you? I'm trying to say, okay, you can't live out what you believe. Should you not go back and re-examine what you believe? Because such a big part of reality, your conscience, your understanding that there are some objective morals, maybe not many, but the abuse of an innocent child would be an example that that's never, ever good. That demands there to be human value that's real and objective, not just because I'm great or, I'm the best. I've been created by God and given value by God. Therefore, for me to abuse an innocent child is absolutely wrong.
So is it being an atheist that gives that gap, or is it just that person that has that gap of like following what their morals are? Because I have my morals and I stick by them.
Good.
Is it being an atheist that makes them that makes them have that gap between their moral and their living their life?
Okay.
Or is it just that person in itself?
Okay, now, what I'm pleading with you is, I respect you living good life. I respect you for having moral standards that you do not compromise. Awesome. Now, allow your conviction, and you got a conviction. If you're not going to sacrifice your morals and compromise them, you know that you got some convictions. Don't you think that those convictions are tying you into reality? That there are some moral absolutes, and you hold very tightly to them. And so what I'm suggesting is, now you got to take a second step, which is, why? Why are those morals real and objective? There's only one way they can be real and objective, is if there is some mind prior to the human mind who creates and defines them and who gives people real value, and therefore you better not devalue them, you better respect them. Does that make any sense?
That makes sense.
Acknowledging that there's order does one thing, and that acknowledges that there's order. That doesn't then imply that there's a designer. You have to prove the existence of the designer by having evidence. You do.
No, you don't. You don't have to prove anything. It's an issue of evidence, not proof. I can't prove that you and I are having this conversation. This conversation might be a dream.
Evidence is the proof. Is what
evidence is not proof.
Yeah, well, no, we have astronomical evidence to support evolution by natural selection, and people believe that because there's evidence.
Because there's evidence.
Not because...
Not proof.
Okay, so where's the evidence that there is a creator? That's not evidence of a creator. That's evidence that there's order. That's evidence that there's order. That's not evidence that somebody is organizing.
Sir, if 100 times out of 100, in my observation of life, I see that order and design comes from an intelligent mind, it is more reasonable for me to believe that there's an intelligent mind behind the order and design of this universe than it is reasonable for me to believe it's all an accident.
I'm not saying it's an accident. I'm saying that over the past 13.4 billion years that the universe has existed, at some point, due to the vastness of the universe, at some point order would arise.
Really?
Because it's an argument of probabilities.
Yeah,
at some point it's probable that order will arise.
So let's you and me play poker, and I'm going to deal 4 times. And every time I deal, I get 4 aces. And you ask me, hey Cliff, how on earth can you deal hands in poker and 4 times in a row get all aces for yourself? And if I say to you, well, because there are an infinite number of universes, and you just got to realize, sir, that in this particular universe, when I deal poker cards, I get aces all the time. You have a reason to pull out your 6-shooter and say, really? You're ripping me off. And if I hide behind, well, there are millions of universes, and it just so happens that we live in a universe where whenever I deal poker cards, I get 4 aces every time. That's ridiculous. It's stupidity. It's irrational, and you know it.
Yeah, but nobody's hiding behind the fact that there's millions of universes. Nobody said that. I said...
Richard Dawkins does. Richard Dawkins says there are trillions of universes, and so therefore this one just sort of popped into existence. Oh, come on. Yeah, well, he's one of the new atheists.
I would love to read that Richard Dawkins quote, because I've never heard Richard Dawkins say that.
He believes in multi-universes.
I mean, if he does, he probably has scientific evidence.
No,
to back
there's
it
no
up.
scientific evidence
I mean,
that there's a
there's-
universe outside our universe.
Physicists agree and disagree on multi-universes, but that's not the argument that we're making. You're trying to say that there's an organizer because there's order.
Exactly. Because 100 times out of 100, in my observation of life, order and design points to a designer. Clothing. If you tell me there's no tailor behind this, that's absurd.
Okay, but I'm saying you're using your preconceived beliefs.
No, sir, I'm using my experience.
No, you are.
I'm
Because
using
what
your
you're saying
experience.
is you're like, oh,
You have it, and you know it, and you know it.
no, what you're saying is oh, life exists. It's ordered. There's order and there's a structure to it. So there has to be somebody creating it. That jump, it doesn't. That
That's not
doesn't
what I'm
belong
saying.
there.
I haven't gotten to life yet. I told you I'll get to that.
Okay, fine. So
You've asked me why I believe God exists, and I said my first piece of evidence is order and design points to some type of intelligent mind. That's all I've said. And if you have a different experience, tell me. If you can show me how order and design comes about by accident, I'd love to hear it. I'm waiting.
I mean, if we're going off of the assumption that the universe didn't start from something or someone.
No, we're not. You've asked me a question, a very good question.
Okay, well, I mean, look at
why
all
do
the
I
order-
believe
look
an
at-
intelligent mind, God exists? And I'm saying the first piece of evidence is order and design. That's all I've said. Now, let me hear your comeback.
So what you're saying is there's a presence of order and design in the universe.
There's order and design in this universe I live in. My experience shows me that.
Okay, so if that's what you're claiming, that there is order and design in the universe
Yep.
present right now,
Yes.
then I can agree with you on that.
Good.
There is order and design in the universe present right now.
Yeah.
I agree with you on that.
Okay. So order and design point us to some type of intelligent mind, some type of God.
Okay, see, that's where I disagree.
Okay, fine.
That's where it doesn't, just because there's order, it doesn't then lead that there's an intelligent designer behind it.
Explain. Back that up. You made a statement, but you're not backing it up with anything. I backed up. Order and design leads to me understanding there's a designer because 100 times out of 100, in my experience, so just please tell me your experience, where order and design comes about by chance. I'd love for you to tell me. When does order and design, in your experience, come about by accident? I'm waiting.
Evolution,
What does that mean?
not by accident, but by natural selection.
Don't you see what you're doing? You're blindly assuming that evolution as an origin is true. That's a crock,
No,
sir.
I'm not blindly assuming. I'm using the
Well, then
evidence.
back
that
it
I've
up.
been Do you want me to present the evidence for evolution?
No, evolution as an origin. I know there's plenty of evolution as a process, but what you're arguing is the order and design of evolution comes about by chance. Please show me the creative mechanism in evolution. I'm waiting. Where's the creative? Not adaptation, but where's the creative mechanism in evolution?
Okay, so now you're saying, so then you just said that order can come about by chance, but then you're saying that there needs to be creativity involved
You
in
gotta
it?
be kidding me. I've said the opposite. I've said order and design do not come about by chance. You say it does, so give me an example.
Of order and design coming about by, I mean, I don't know what I don't know what you want me to say. Like, evolution is literally, I mean, that shows that there's order. Structure in life is order. And as far as we're concerned, as far as we know, evolution did come about by chance. Evolution
Sure.
came about by
That's
chance.
what we're debating. The universe, nature. Just don't tell me that. I can't say to you, God exists because there's order and design. I gotta say, my experience, my observation of life is that order and design never comes about by chance. It always points to an intelligent mind. Second piece of evidence that God exists is I observe that life comes from life. Life never comes from non-life. I don't care if it's plant life, animal life, human life. You never have life come from non-life.
That's not true.
All right, fine. Then show me. Where does life come from
I
non-life?
mean, we can look at a biology 2 textbook, and we can see how life started. And we have evidence to support that. Evidence, real
Well,
evidence.
give it to me then. If you have it, give it.
You want me to explain to you how life started?
How life comes from non-life. That's what I want you to explain.
Okay, well, there were actually, we have experiments that show that we can recreate DNA.
Thank you. Recreate. We, intelligent beings, can recreate. We, living beings, can create life. Very good.
Just pump the brakes. Pump the brakes a second. You can create DNA. There's multiple experiments that have tested this. You can create DNA through just a little bit. You have nitrogen, oxygen, carbon,
Right.
and you put it into a cell, basically, or into a chamber, and then you put electricity or energy through it. And now biologists believe that what happened is that in the early stages of Earth, there was lots of electricity in the atmosphere, and there was also hot spots due to volcanoes, creating thermodynamic energy, which then created, due to the fusion and the fission of these molecules, nitrogen and oxygen and carbon, they created branched chain amino acids, which are the building blocks of DNA. And then if you get lipid, you can create something that's called a protocell by the DNA going into the lipids, right? And then what happens is the chemistry inside the cell and the chemistry outside the cell are different. From there, multiplication happens, and then you eventually get multi-celled colonies and multi-celled organisms from that through evolution. That's the evidence that
Yeah.
life started from something that is not life.
You just told me in a lab with intelligent
No.
minds, scientists,
I'm telling
certain
you
things can happen.
that was
No, sir,
recreated.
it never occurs in reality that life comes from non-life by accident. You never have it. Never once. And you know it if you're going to be honest.
Who's like in biology, or it's pretty obvious to anyone that's taken an introductory biology class
Yeah?
how life originated. It's covered in Bio 2. I mean, it's not super complex topics, and there is ample evidence to support it. And what I'm saying is the study was a recreation of the early atmosphere of the universe in
Really?
order to simulate the early atmosphere of the universe.
How well do we know the early atmosphere of the universe?
I mean, pretty well. We
Oh, yeah?
have a pretty good understanding what molecules were very present
Yeah.
due to the death rate of stars at that time
Yeah,
in the universe.
right.
And that's going to tell us the abundance of molecules at what percentage.
You bet. And that's what Dr. Stanley thought he had all that wrapped up at the University of Chicago. The only problem is NASA proved that Stanley was wrong in his guess about what the earliest atmosphere was comprised of. No, sir. We don't know exactly what the earliest atmosphere was
I
like.
never
We're
said we know
continuing
exactly.
to grow
Never,
in our
never
understanding
said
of that. Third piece of evidence that God exists is moral absolutes, objective morals. You know very well that the abuse of an innocent child is never good. It is always wrong. The only way there can be an objective moral is if there is some type of God to create innate human value and a value of justice that is intangible. Sir, all your biology can tell me is...
I don't believe in objective morality, so I think
Yes,
that
you
this-
do.
No, I don't. So I think that this
You
argument
use the word should and ought, don't you?
that doesn't mean that I believe in objective
Well, when you
morality.
say should and ought, what are you
No,
talking
that
about?
means that I have my own morals that I think people should do and ought to do. That doesn't mean that there's an objective morality that's correct for all people.
Where on earth do you get off saying you should not have done that to me if it's just your personal opinion that you realize is biased, prejudiced, and totally relative? Why on earth would you be so arrogant to tell this guy what he can do and what he can't do?
So, morality to me,
Yeah.
all I can speak is for myself. Morality to me is based off of the society and the societal pressures to go towards one or another thing. Because there are, I mean, you know, obviously, like, look at Jewish people. I mean, to me, circumcision can be considered immoral. It's genital mutilation. I mean, look at Muslim people. They do that to women. They
Yeah.
generally mutilate women
Right.
in a lot of Muslim countries. So is that objectively good or is that objectively bad? Well, I mean, I think it's wrong because of the society I grew up in.
Okay.
Now, I think most people can agree that's probably wrong, but not all people can. So there can't be an objective moral reasoning there. It's not objective for all people because throughout societies and time, morals have waxed and waned with the society. So I think it's more intelligent to assume that morality comes from the society and societal pressures than being innately human. I mean, if we can even look at Germany during World War II, the amount
Right.
of people that were pro-Holocaust,
Yeah.
that's objectively, I mean, we can assume that's objectively wrong for most people, but objectivity means for all people, right? So we can play with that word and say for most people and use it as a for most people kind of argument, but really it's entirely subjective because it depends on the society.
Okay. Nuremberg trials. You brought up Nazi Germany, so let's talk about it. Nuremberg trials.
I mean, are you going to address what I just said about the objective?
Can you let me finish?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Nuremberg trials, 1945 to 1949. The Nazi lawyers were brilliant. They stood before the Allied judges and said, I hope you realize that these Nazi officers were commanded to gas Jews into Dachau and Auschwitz. Their culture, their superiors, taught them that gassing Jews into Dachau and Auschwitz was good. Where do you guys get off, coming from a different culture, judging these Nazi officers? And the Nuremberg trials shut down. Until Robert Jackson, the American counsel, stood up and said, wait a second, there is a law above the law of culture, and according to this moral law, it is evil to gas Jews into Dachau and Auschwitz. The Nuremberg trials kicked into gear again. Why? Because there was an acknowledgement that morality is not defined by culture. Because if it's true what you say, that morality is defined by culture, the Nazis were just following their culture. And there's nothing wrong with gassing Jews if your culture tells you to gas Jews. Baloney to that. You and I have consciences and rational minds, and we understand that just because a culture teaches something is good does not make it good. That is why I'm telling you, the evidence of the way you live your life, the way the judges of the Nazis in the Nuremberg trials lived their lives, is that there's got to be some type of objective morality that we are able to understand with our consciences and our rational minds. And guess what? If that's true, there's got to be some type of mind, maybe minds, as you pointed out very accurately, some type of mind or minds pre-existent to human minds that defines what is right and what is wrong. Does that make any sense?
No, I get what you're saying. I think that's more due, why they did that is more due to the fact that it's what brings about the most good for the most amount of people possible. So I mean, if we're talking about that being objective morality, if that's like the basis of what you consider objective morality, that's how you're going to define it, as what brings about the most amount of good for as many people as possible. I mean, I still think as a society, as a human society, we have things and different sects in our society that agree with different things that others would find immoral that we don't stop. There are things across the globe that we don't stop that most people in the United States or in other parts of the established world would find as immoral, but we don't stop it. But it's because they don't find it immoral. That's what I'm saying, is if there's other people that don't find it immoral because of how they were brought up and how they were raised in the society that they were raised in, even if it's something small, if we can't all agree on the same morals objectively, then there's no such thing as objective morality in total. If we can't all agree on every single moral, and we can't all share the same objective morality for all people, then how can you argue that there's an objective morality?
Very, very simply. The professor who said to me, the only way that I can know something historically is if everybody agrees that this happened. And I had to look at that professor and say, you are so intellectually naive, it's scary. Just because someone denies that slavery happened in the United States does not mean that in reality slavery did not happen in the United States. And if you think that I got to get 100% agreement that slavery really did happen in the United States in order to believe that slavery happened, that is such a blind spot, it's incredible. Similarly, to say that racism is wrong only if everybody agrees that racism is wrong is so blind, it's scary. I better have the conscience and the intellectual wherewithal to realize that because God created her and him in his image, therefore racism is wrong.
No, so what I'm saying,
I'm not in touch with reality.
No, so what I'm saying is there are definitely things that are more good or more bad for society. There's such a thing as, that not having slavery is objectively the most good for as many people as possible. That one thing. But how can you argue that humans have objective morality or a gifted objective morality by a creator that created all humans? How can you argue that if all humans don't share the same morality?
Because we have a free will. And at times I know what's good. And instead of doing what I know is good, I do the opposite. Sir, that's why I experience guilt. I know what's right very often. And instead of doing what I know is right, I do the opposite. And guess what? Part of the reason I feel so comfortable sharing that is you're no different from me. At times your conscience tells you that is good. And instead of doing that, you do the opposite. And then by golly, you experience guilt. Bravo. Now allow your guilt to wake you up to the fact that you know very well what's good at times. And you choose to do the opposite. Therefore, you have to answer to somebody. You answer to God. Therefore, ask Him for forgiveness. Ask Christ for forgiveness for the wrong that you've done. And don't just blame somebody else or rationalize your guilt away.
Nobody's saying that you blame somebody else. You obviously own up
We
to
do
your
it all
own
the
guilt.
time.
Yeah,
We
I'm
blame
sure.
other people all the time as a human
people,
race.
People definitely do, but that doesn't mean that there's a God that you can give
No,
your forgiveness
it means that there are real values that I understand, be I atheist, agnostic, Christian, Buddhist, whatever. And I violate my conscience by doing that which I know is wrong. It happens every day to every single one of us.
But there aren't real values. There aren't values. There are values that are best for as many people as possible. That's what I've said.
Fine. So I smack her in the face. You ask me, hey, Cliff, why'd I do that? And I say, because I felt like it.
That's what I'm saying. That would bring about the exact opposite of the most good for as many people
According
as
to your
possible.
definition. I hope you're not naive enough to think that Adolf Hitler did not know exactly what would bring Nazi Germany the most good. It was getting that economics machine back into gear because the Germans were suffering from poverty.
but-
And so Adolf Hitler had a very shrewd way of getting the Nazi economy back into gear. And guess what? It was evil. Totally evil. But if you're telling me that, no, Cliff, good and evil are really defined by culture, by a nation, then what he did was not evil. It was just a way to kick the German economy back into gear.
Okay, so yeah, what Nazi Germany did, you just said it was evil, so that definitely does not bring about the most amount of good for as many people as possible. I feel like I have to repeat myself 7 times.
Well, I gotta feel like I gotta straighten you out, sir. You honestly think that the Nazis thought that gassing Jews was bad for Germany?
You're gonna beat him up.
I'm not gonna beat him up. He's a great thinker, okay? And I appreciate him so much thinking, okay? Thank you.
Yeah.
All right? But his thinking is so, it's scary.
No, I mean, I'm not saying that. I do think that Adolf Hitler thought that that was what was best for Germany. I do think that he genuinely
Thank
thought
you.
that. Now, what he thinks and what's the best for the most amount of people possible
Yes.
is not always the same thing. That's what I'm saying. My argument is that if all people don't agree on all morals, which we have both agreed that they don't,
Right?
okay, if all people don't agree on everything moral, then how can there be an objective morality?
Very
That's
simple.
objectively true for everyone.
Very simple. This guy is of a different race than I am. It makes me feel better about my whiteness to be racist towards him. Now, if you're going to tell me that it's wrong, I'm going to tell you take a hike. Because my identity, my self-image, is based on being superior to him. I'm standing here saying that's a humongous tragedy on my part. Because in reality, he is just as valuable as I am. Not because I'm a white intellectual at UT, but because he's created in the image of God. He has an innate value because he's a human being. He's not a cockroach. He's not an ant. He's not just a material part of the evolutionary cycle. He's a human being created with a soul. And therefore, if I dump on him, that is evil. And guess what? I can get a bunch of white guys to agree with me in my racism. It doesn't make it right just because a social contract is made by a bunch of white guys that say white supremacy. Whites are better than brown, than black, than Asian. I'm standing here saying, you know, hopefully, objectively, that that is wrong. Why do you know that? Because this man is not an accident. He's a human being created in the image of God.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'm still falling back on the same thing that I've had to say 7 times, which is that, yeah, if you're racist and you have a group of your racist buddies that all agree with you,
Yeah.
that still also being racist does not bring about the most amount of good for as many people. It's a utilitarian approach to morality. That's what most people kind of agree with. Most people. That doesn't make it objective. Objective truth is something that is true for all people. That's an objective truth.
Yeah.
So you have even said that all people do not agree on morality. So there is not an objective morality.
Yes,
Because
there
all-
is. It's an
because all
objective
people don't
morality
agree, there is
that
an
because we have a
objective
free will, we contradict. What I'm saying is, if I have a racist attitude towards him, if I have a sexist attitude towards her, I am wrong. I am wrong. Why? Because racism is a denial of his value, and sexism is a denial of her value.
So you say that there's an objective morality, and
Right.
that's one of the proof facts or whatever. That's why there is a God, right? Well, then how do you explain the change in morality over time since we started, like as humans, and morality has changed over time to where we are now? And to me, that's not objective morality. That is subjective morality,
Okay?
because it changes.
All right.
And how can you, so we're talking about objective morality now, or are we talking about all the way over time? Because I agree with what he's saying. I think he's doing a great argument, because like he said, not everybody has the same morals as somebody else. It's all subjective. It's not objective.
Okay. And I'm standing here saying, I don't care if I get 10 people to agree with me that white is superior to brown. That is objectively wrong. I don't care how many people believe it. I don't care if the Dred Scott decision in the U.S. Supreme Court insists that white folks are much more invaluable than black folks because they're just 3/5 the value of white folks. I don't care if the U.S. Supreme Court says it. I don't care if the culture says it. I don't care if the majority of students at UT Austin say it. There is an objective justice, value of justice. And you know that and I know that when you critique what's wrong.
But then how do you explain the unfortunate past that we have where people did believe that, and that was on their morals, even though it's wrong? We know that it's wrong.
Right.
It still was how they thought and how they believed back then. And so I'm asking you, how does this objective morality
Yes.
apply to now, past, and future?
Good.
Because in terms of God and religion,
Yep.
he's overseen all of this time, all of this everything, and he's watched all these humans and had a hand in play in all of this. So
Good.
how does your objective morality point stand for past, present, and future?
You bet.
How is it not subjective?
God's character is holy and just and good. God created. Therefore, the 10 Commandments are not the 10 suggestions. Murder is always wrong. Past, present, future. Adultery is always wrong. Past, present, future. Lying, always wrong. Past, present, future. Stealing, always wrong. Past, present, and future. And when we human beings murder, commit adultery, lie, steal, past, present, and future, we are violating the value of justice that has been created and defined by a good, consistent, holy, just God. He's given us consciences, and past, present, and future. I don't care if it's Cain and Abel. I don't care if it's somebody who murdered Gabby Petito. And I don't care if it's someone who murders in the future. Murder is absolutely evil. Not because I'm a brilliant white liberal intellectual. No. It's because God has created all people with intrinsic value, innate value. That's why murder's wrong.